Hey everybody, it's time for another edition of Sev and Geff Live. Paul Severino here, Glenn Geffner with you, of course. We've got Marlins pitching coach Mel Stottlemyre Jr. coming up in just a couple of minutes. Glenn, it's good to be with you again. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Hard to believe it was 12 weeks ago today we played our final spring training game. Yeah. 84 days. And here we are, still waiting for baseball to start up again.
Yeah, again, our fingers are crossed. There's been, obviously, rumors on both sides and what's going on. Glenn and I, unfortunately, are not privy to much of that information, that inside stuff. All we can do is kind of be a fan with the rest of you out there and kind of wait and see how things go. Hopefully we get back to baseball at some point in some fashion in 2020. We also in the last couple of weeks, Glenn, your intern crew over there has been hard at work kind of turning our shows into podcasts, which are now available literally everywhere on the globe.
Right. After folks watch us live here, or if they miss us live here, you can now catch all of our Sev Geff conversations via podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. In 4 days after we launched last week, we were the number 16 most watched baseball or most listened to baseball podcasts on Apple. We're number 5 in the UK. So we're killing it in the UK.
Fantastic.
But so check out the podcast. Hope you'll subscribe. They'll go directly to your phone. And let us know what you think.
Awesome. Also, home run rewards card holders, by the way. We've been doing this throughout May, now into June as well. Today's bonus code for watching the program is TRIVIA, TRIVIA. So enter the bonus code to score some extra rewards points. Don't forget new trivia questions being released in the Home Run Rewards portal every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Visit marlins.com/rewards. To get rewarded. So again, glad to be involved with that. Of course, other things going on, Glenn, is the draft coming up in just about a week or so, right? So that leads us to our question of the day.
That's right. Marlins had the 3rd overall pick in the first round. The draft is 6 days away on Wednesday. So we asked, who would you like to see the Marlins select with the 3rd overall pick in the draft next Wednesday? We gave you 4 options. The names you hear the most is the top 3 prospects. I'll go alphabetically. The lefty out of Texas A&M, Asa Lacy. You've got the third baseman / outfielder, Austin Martin from Vanderbilt. And you've got Arizona State first baseman Spencer Torkelson. A couple of big bats, very big arm. And I gave you a none of the above, a write-in candidate option as well. At last report, Lacy and Torkelson were neck and neck at 40% of the vote.
Fantastic. We will we'll check that out. And I have a feeling I know where our guest is going to vote because he just wants another pitcher to deal with, right? Pitching coach Mel Stottlemyre Jr. joins us right now. Mel, thanks again for taking the time. How are you today?
Well, considering I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys having me on. Seems like that this is a popular thing in this day and age in uncharted territory with podcasts, and great to hear you guys' podcast and your show's doing so good. So.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah,
here to talk baseball, which is my favorite thing to do.
Good. I expect to do that for the next hour or so. And again, that's kind of where this all went. I mean, we're used to by now June 4th. We're all hanging around the cage every day, 4 o'clock, or on the buses, on the planes, talking with you in the clubhouse and whatnot. And we miss that. Those sorts of things certainly enhance our broadcast and. To be able to rack your brain for the next hour, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, we all miss it. And Paul, as you know, it's this time of year, we've been locked into our routines and, spending time together with our baseball families. And I've been married going on 33 years, and I've learned a lot of things about my wife. And I promise you, she's sick of me. I have never spent so much time at home watching TV, listening to news, and I don't do that in general, but to do it this time of year has been not good.
Right.
So by the end of the first week in June, we're usually starting to look ahead to the All-Star break a little bit and thinking about catching our breath for a few days. Instead, we're thinking about getting started. We've asked a lot of people we've had on the show about what getting started again is going to look like. From your perspective, Mel, let's start with this. Where are things now? What's your degree of communication and interaction been with your pitching staff?
Well, I'll tell you one thing, and I learned a lot about this organization in the last few months. And I've been a part of a few of them. I was over in Seattle, when we won there. It was a winning organization, and we did some good things. And I spent 14 years over in Arizona. The one thing I can tell you about this organization is they are not short on leadership and communication. I know the fans of Miami have not felt that yet. And we talk about all the great things that we think are going to come from this organization and where we're at. But the leadership of Derek Jeter that has streamlined down to Mike Hill and Brian Chatton, Gary Dimbo, to Don Mattingly, to their staff, has been second to none. With that being said, the rest of baseball might feel like that these guys are at home and you understand all the logistics of the bickering and things going back and forth. These guys are working their butt off. So we have our organizational meetings on Mondays, and it's front office, it's major league staff, it's talking about our communication within each one of our specific areas and trying to just keep people informed. And with that being said, we have a lot of our pitchers down here in Florida that are just young enough to really not know and understand what all of this has meant and the direction that it's headed. And so with that being said, they've kept themselves ready. We sat down with each one of them. We went over a program. We've done plenty of video work. I can't possibly make every one of their bullpens, and especially up until the last couple weeks where Major League Baseball gave us the okay to go ahead to go to our facility to work with these guys. But it's been a lot of video work. There's been a lot of things that we've done with our analytic department to look into trying to discover, better ways to have our guys lean on the strength of their pitches. We've watched game after game after game from last year, and just trying to take this time to try to get better. And there's ways to do that, And the other important thing, and I learned this from my dad, was to try to keep their minds right. Because as we know, this is a tough time in the world and in baseball. It's easy to go home and do nothing and shut it down and woe's me. So I've had lots of conversations with our pitchers, daily, weekly, besides just going over the films and their bullpens, but to keep their minds right and to keep it directed in a good direction to where we can continue to carry some of those great things we were doing this spring. And that's important because Don Mattingly talks about it all the time. It's like, physically we're going to do our part, and our guys are young enough, they're going to keep themselves ready, but it's a lot is the mental side of it. So we've tapped into some analytics. We've opened our eyes into some different things. I've had conversations about their games and what we can do to get better. And that has been my motivation for them and my challenge to them.
Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. You've got to, even, my son's playing Little League, right? It's like, just do something. Do something every day. Don't let yourself stray too far from it. And especially the mental side of things, without question. And again, I don't think anybody really truly has the answer how long the season's going to be. Is it 50? Is it 82? Is it 114? Who knows what it's going to be? But I think that whatever we hope it will be, it's going to be a bit of a sprint. And I don't care if the Marlins, we've seen what the outsiders think the Marlins were supposed to be in 2020 and what kind of division that the Marlins are in. And it'd probably be an uphill climb to go from 100 losses to 100 wins. We get it. But in a shortened season, hey, man, anything goes. And they say it all the time, and this, pitching wins championships, and the Marlins are loaded with it. Anything can happen if they play baseball in 2020.
And Paul, I think you understand that, and certainly the organization understands that, our leaders understand that. It's one of the reasons that I chose to, and I live in Lewiston, Idaho, and I chose to stay down here. And I chose to stay down in Florida because I two things. Number one, I still wanted to keep a connection with the players. And you know how it is sometimes where you get distance between you and things can get lost. I understand where these guys were. I know what they went through last year, and I know the point that they got to in spring training, and I know some of the great things that they knew they were starting to do. Maybe baseball didn't take notice, but as an organization, we understood it, and I think it was important that all of that didn't get lost and that we didn't start over. So, we we derived a program for each one of them that would allow them to, when we do start up, that there wasn't going to be such a big gap to have to try to get some of that stuff back. So while we're not facing a different color uniform, there's a lot of things that we've got done physically, mentally, and our players have actually, as crazy as it sounds, without competing, in some respect, a lot of them have got a lot better with some of the work that we've done during this time. So, you know, what's funny about this baseball is this game is, you take them out of the competition and they don't have to go out and think about competing sometimes. And sometimes those changes come a little harder. But if you could take that competition away, and then you can focus on some of those things that they need to get better, it seems like they can relate and get a handle on those things. And then the mindset plays a big part in moving forward with some of those deficiencies. We have got a ton of work done. I'm not going to make you any promises, but I will promise you that they will be ready and that guys are going to be better.
What's the scene look like in Jupiter? I know you've been traveling across the state a little bit since MLB and the state announced you could reopen the complex. What's going on in Jupiter these days?
Well, you know, the first part of when we got done with spring training and going home was not knowing how long this thing was going to take to get back, and then to find out from our owners and our leaders, like what we can do and what we can't do. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go down and be with them in every bullpen. But I also knew at some point they were going to open our complex, or they were going to allow me to go down into Miami, where most of our rotation is, and to be able to get my eyes on them. So over the last couple of weeks, we've transitioned from doing all of our work from video and me having conversations with the guys to where I can actually lay my eyes on them and I can physically get my hands on them, keeping distance, right, in Jupiter. So twice a week, our guys have worked their way up to. We started out with our bullpens and our what we call up downs for our starters, trying to keep some intensity, a little bit of volume without building, because we don't understand our time frame when we're going to get back. But just know that when we're given 3 weeks to get ourselves ready, that these guys are going to have an opportunity to jump into scrimmage type atmosphere in our spring camp and be able to do that quickly. And you can do that because you have young players and they're wired different. So our guys have been throwing bullpens, and they're all throwing live batting practices. We're doing that 2 pitchers at a time, 2 hitters at a time, because we can have 4 players at the complex at any given time. And so I have 5 time slots. I'm spending approximately 6 hours on each one of those days, and we're getting our work in. And I can tell you, guys are starting to ask for more, and I'm actually having to hold them back. And, you know, there's a lot of time that's been lost, right? There's some innings that we can't get back. And it's certainly, this is the next best thing that we can do for our players to get them ready for that next thing we're going to ask them to do in the spring. And kind of commend our guys, because it'd be real easy for them to not be focused, and the unknown sometimes getting guys way mentally. These guys have been all about business, and I love what we're doing.
This is not a Marlins-centric question, but more so a pitching question with a Marlins slant because of all the depth that's there at the minor league level. But without a minor league season, how does that affect a young pitcher?
A lot. I'm going to tell you a lot, because as we know, and you know, I've only been here a year. I can tell you, in one particular year over in Seattle, we went through 40-something pitchers in a year. You know, God forbid that doesn't happen here. You know, but we had the depth, and there was injuries up and down. So not only do you need depth, but you also need, you know, guys like Cabrera, Rogers, Sixto, Guzman, Garrett's, Holloway's. It's on and on and on. You need those guys inching their way towards becoming a factor to help the major league level out. And you only get that by getting experience. And that experience is innings and going through all the things that young pitchers go through. You cannot replicate that in a live batting practice session. And so, we've talked about that as an organization and what that means. And it's an important year really for this organization moving forward, because we talk about those young players starting to come and starting to arrive. Well, that only happens with that experience. And if we can get back and the major league team can get back to playing baseball, we could move forward with the other part of bringing our young players back and deciding who we bring back and what environment we put them in to compete in and where we do that at, so that we can allow some of that to happen, because that is an important piece of this organization moving forward. And I don't like to use the word rebuild. I think that's a dangerous word, because we know what our fearless leader, what he represents, right? Derek. And Donnie too. We play to win games. But we are in a point in our career that we are transitioning from a lot of veteran players, guys that got paid a lot of money to play this game, to the youth and the development and building a strong organization, a strong pitching department.
Yeah.
Great leaders, great pitching coaches in this organization, to get guys to a point to where this organization can find out what it means to win and taste that. So we are headed in the right direction, and the youth is going to play a big part of that. Those names are going to factor in rather quickly.
How does a young pitcher get over that hump? Once you've gotten to the big leagues, you begin to get your feet wet. In the beginning, you're worried about staying here and doing what it takes to remain in the business. How do you get over that hump and put together a young pitching staff that's ready to win?
Well, as a coach, you spend enough time doing this. I've had some great young pitchers, the Brandon Webbs, and I had Randy Johnson for a little bit. Scherzer as a rookie, the Dan Herron. It's on and on and on. Paxton, Hernandez, and now young guys, Sandy, Alcantara and Lopez and Sixtos and guys like that. There's a point in the big leagues that I call survival mode. And young pitchers will come up, and a lot of them will get in awe of the third deck, the brighter lights, right? And facing the same teams and the same hitters over and over again. Having scouting reports be a part of their game day and part of their preparation in between. Having hitters watch them and get to know the pitcher and what their tendencies are and find out what their deficiencies are. It's a league it's full of wolves, man, and they prey. So they go through that. They go through the uncertainty of, do I belong here? And then there's something that clicks. This is one of the greatest, bit of advice that my dad gave me, because my dad knew how I was wired. And I'm a worker. I love to push. I have high expectations, and I don't settle. And sometimes as a young pitching coach, when I first started in this business, I would tolerate or maybe have a less of an understanding of what young players go through. And I drove them hard. And I still drive my guys hard. And I don't let them just settle into being mediocre, and I want greatness. So sometimes as a coach, you have to take a step back, and you have to have an understanding of patience and everything that those guys are going to go through. So I can only tell you as a coach, there's no timeline. There's no time frame. There's no blueprint. And they all have their own resiliency, and they're all different, and they respond to different things. You guys witnessed Sandy last year, the last 6 weeks of the season. I promise you, you can define what he started, what he looked like, that, and what he did to allow himself to start to have some success versus what he didn't do. And one of the biggest things that he got over is he started believing in his stuff, and that he knew by throwing the ball over the plate that his stuff was good enough that he could have success. Up to that point, it was survival, and he didn't know. And when they got their butt kicked, they didn't always know where to go. And sometimes it was hard to get them back up on the horse and get them going again. So it's such a mental part of the game that really factors in and can stunt players from getting that one thing that, like you're talking about, getting over that hump. That's a long answer. There's a lot that goes into it. So it's kind of my job to try to keep that pulse and that finger on it and to motivate it and to drive them guys in a timely fashion. And it's delicate.
Baseball, I guess, is the family business, but specifically pitching, the family business as well. Of course, your father played in the big leagues for a long time, 11 years, 3 times a 20-game winner, a 5-time All-Star, moved on, of course, to a pitching coach, won World Series with the Yankees. Your brother played a ton of time in the big leagues as well, a couple of World Series with the Blue Jays. What was that like kind of growing up in that baseball family, that pitching background?
Well, man, Paul, I really, and I don't talk to a lot of people about this because we've been through with the loss of my dad, and my dad was a humble man, and my dad. With that being said, my dad did some great things, as did my brother. So being in our household was really no different probably than a lot of families, other than on a lot of our hunting, fishing trips. Besides, and hunting was not about going out and getting animals. It was about family and togetherness and just sharing experiences. So most of our trips, we talked about baseball and, lots of card games. And even when we got older and we moved out of the household, it was baseball the whole time. And it was baseball because we loved it. And we got to experience that. My brothers and I got to experience baseball at a very young age. And, it was a dream of ours to go on and play and follow in our dad's footsteps. But all kids think that they're going to get that opportunity one day. And for the most part, that doesn't happen. It doesn't come true. So I look back and running around Yankee Stadium, Mickey Mantle, Thurman Munson, Whitey Ford, Elston Howard, Craig Nettles, Catfish Hunter, Yogi Berra, Munson, Mercer, a lot of greats, and playing catch with those guys, going fishing with them in the spring. Really taught me a lot about life. But to this day, as I look back at those times, the one thing that really sticks out in my mind is I really watched and put myself back in those outfields and run around at Yankee Stadium and going to all the games and traveling and being with my mom and our family and watching my dad's. Man, those guys had fun. They worked. I can only tell you what my dad did in the off season to prepare himself. But it really laid a wonderful platform and paved a path for me to prepare myself as a coach and a player to go on and really enjoy this game and to hope to be able to pass some of that on. Because let's face it, not every kid's going to kind of get that opportunity. And it really is a special family. Being raised the way that we were and the way that my parents did things for us kids. So
we could spend hours talking about your dad and his lifetime in this game. You mentioned him 3 or 4 times before we transitioned into this part of the conversation. if folks don't know your dad's whole story, we don't have the time to go into it, but they got to Google Mel Stottlemyre. They ought to go back, read his book. Great career as a great Yankees pitcher, 11 years. He was done at 32 with a torn rotator cuff, but he was the best player in the New York Yankees, kind of like Don Mattingly, in an era where after his rookie year in '64, the Yankees went into a little bit of a tailspin for a while. But he was a great player and great Yankees team. He's got a plaque in Monument Park. And then 23 years as a pitching coach. He was there when Doc Gooden arrived. He was with the Mets when they won it in '86, 4 World Series championships with the Yankees. An unbelievable career in the game. You see a lot of people who follow their dads into playing baseball, and it's obvious why that could happen. But not many have done what the Stottlemyres have done, where you followed your dad into coaching at the major league level. How did that work out? Was he an inspiration for you in that regard as well?
Very instrumental. And I'll tell you, as you said, my dad did some great things. And I don't know if you knew him. I'm sure Paul did. Super, super humble guy. He took the time for the littlest of people. And that's just how he was. And I can tell you, he played for the love of the game. And he never talked ever about those losing seasons, and never blamed anything on his teammates. So he really was a different breed, and he taught us a lot about that. He never had to talk to Todd and I about winning and losing. I think it was just a byproduct of the work and doing things the right way in. But so, I didn't play a long time in the big leagues, and I had 7 surgeries. I had 3 on my shoulder, had an elbow and some knees. And, I did everything that I could to scratch and claw to get to the big leagues. Very unconventional path. It was a first-round draft pick, and I had a lot to prove to the baseball world, trying to follow in my dad's footsteps. So there was a lot of pressure that went through that. So when I wrapped my playing career up and went through my last surgery, and it was really, I couldn't get back to a level that I needed to. It was kind of time to go do something different, and I can tell you it was hard. Mentally, what I went through, I would not wish that on my worst enemy, because it was something I've done my whole life, and now I felt like it was taken away. So I was mad at the world. But I love the game, and my dad knew that. And he pushed me to get into coaching right away, and I rebelled a little bit, kind of like, young kids do all with their dads. And but I knew at some point I was going to get into coaching, but I needed a mental blow. So I went back home and bought my dad's baseball camp partner out and ran baseball camps around the country. Took some ex-professional ball players, and we did that. And I went and coached young kids. Kind of got me away, but it kept me involved. And then, man, I got the itch again. That drive, that needing to get back on the field and compete. There is nothing like that feeling, and I needed that again. So my dad knew in time that I would get back. And look, I learned a lot of lessons as a young pitching coach, and I had a great platform. I had a guy that was a great pitcher and a great coach. Lots of wisdom, right? Lots of advice. The one thing my dad let both my brother and I do is make our decisions, make our own bed and sleep in it, make some mistakes, and kind of be ourselves. But with that being said, man, I take so much of the experiences that I've learned from watching my dad, both a player and as a coach, into my style today and with my players. The patience, I have to say, was probably the hardest thing that I learned. I was a lot like my mom, probably somewhere in between my brother and my dad, the way that I was wired, and loved to work, and just had a hard time settling into mediocrity. I know my pitchers feel that with me sometimes. They see Stott coming across the clubhouse, and we're going to have a conversation. It's like, uh-oh, here we go again. But what a great, I mean, I wouldn't be the pitching coach that I am, whether good, bad, or indifferent, today if it wasn't for what my dad did, and my brother too. I learned a lot from watching my brother. Some things what to do and some things not to do. And we all have to go through that, even as young coaches.
Yeah, that's the thing about coaching that like it's one thing to say, hey, hold your hands here, or do this or do that or whatever, but to know that I don't even know what the actual number is of pitchers that you're dealing with at camp, but let's just call it 50. That's 50 different personalities. That's 50 different pitching mechanics. That's 50 different skill sets and arsenals and all kinds of stuff. And if you just said to all 50 of those guys, your delivery needs to look like this, and you need to throw these pitches now, you'd fail, right? You need to be able to manage 50 different things about 50 different people, really. And there's so many balls in the air when it comes to that, and the good ones like yourself get that and are able to do that at such a high level. It's fascinating to see it.
Yeah, we call it the tool belt, right? And as a coach, you want to equip yourself to be able to work with each and every individual. And we all understand that, and you guys watch it in the booth. Everybody's different. There is no magical formula. There's not a blueprint of set of mechanics. Sure, there's certain, variables or attributes or, must things that have to happen to get guys in a certain position to be efficient, deliver a baseball, and to repeat and all that. But there's so much that goes into it. And it's an ongoing thing in the coaching world. I push myself every day to learn the analytical viewpoints and how we can relate to young players to where we can get through and get to them, a little bit quicker and to get to their level. The mechanics and to be able to have conversations with each one of those guys requires a coach getting to know biomechanics and to understand movements. And let's face it, there's bad mechanics too that actually work.
Right.
And it's very dangerous to be able to iron a guy out sometimes and make him perfectly mechanically sound, and all of a sudden his stuff backs up. And the other part, the mindset and the mental part. I learned so much from my dad because he was such a thinking man pitcher. And I got to a point in my life where I was a young coach, and I used to watch his pitchers with the Yankees. And I witnessed conversations at the end of the seasons when I would go visit my dad. And I know I wasn't supposed to do it because I was with another organization. But, I sat in some meetings. And I sat in the video room with him and Clemens. I got to know Doc, the Cones and the Fernandez and the Wells. And I got to know those guys and the Pettits. Some great thinking man's pitchers, and hear those conversations that my dad was having with them. And it was fascinating discussions. It wasn't always about mechanics. And sometimes it was on approach, trying to get guys to believe in a pitch. And he would have to make a hard sell to them sometimes. That's part of coaching. And there's so much that goes into it. And my best advice for young pitching coaches is sometimes you have to take a step back too, and you have to listen to your players. And my dad was a master at communicating and getting the utmost out of each pitcher. And he did that with my brother and I, and it was no different with his players. And, I love that part about him. And to be able to take that on and hopefully give that to our players is important to me.
You've mentioned analytics a couple of times. There's so much technology at your fingertips in doing your job today. How different is your job as a pitching coach in 2020 than your dad's job was as a pitching coach?
When my dad got out in 2008, and I remember him telling me, and it kind of floored me. And look, by then he had done everything he wanted to do in the game, in my opinion, right? We got 4 or 5 rings, and been was on the Mets World Series teams and the Yankees, and had a great career as a player. So he really had done, in my opinion, everything that he needed to do or to get out of the game. And he told me it was time for him to move on. And that was kind of hard because you think your dad's going to be immortal and being around the game forever. And look, it doesn't last forever. But he told me this game is for you younger guys. And he says it's changed. The game's still the game, but how people view it, how we train our guys, and how guys think is different. So it's not that he was quitting. He just knew that it was time for him to move over and to be able to give some younger guys some opportunities to come in and pave their way. And with that being said, he knew the transition that the game was about to head in with the analytics, and not to say that he wasn't going to embrace it, but it was going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy, and for people to get familiar with it, the viewpoints, the numbers. And let's face it, there's more and more players in the off season going to some of these private sectors that are getting trained, off of numbers. So I'm going to tell you, my biggest hurdle is, as a pitching coach, was learning that part of the game. And with that being said, there's sometimes you rebel, and it's very natural from a guy that has relied on his eyes and his gut instinct to sometimes lean on some numbers. But my first instinct was to push it away and trust my eyes. And the other part, that I learned is like, you know what? All of those things we've been doing forever. I use Pete Harnisch as an example. Back in the day that Pete Harnisch, and I only mention him because he was the guy that pitched at the top of the zone, had a high spin. Pete knew that he could four-seam fastballs and pitch at the top of the zone. He didn't need numbers to tell you how to do that. So there's a lot of good that comes in it. And the good part of it is, I think it will help you identify the strengths and weapons of pitchers so that we could suggest maybe they need to push them. And so that we could open pitchers' eyes to how important or how effective not only the league but baseball thinks that pitch is. And it might mean, in Jeff Brigham's case, where he upped his breaking ball usage last year. Start throwing more for strikes so that they can honor that pitch, right? He become a much more effective pitcher. We utilize those numbers. They brought those guys, the analytic team brought them to me. I processed it, I thought about it. It was a delicate, conversation. And when you sit down with players, you better do your homework because they're going to ask why.
Right.
And so there's a lot of good. But here's the thing that will never go away, is we can prepare those guys and we can show them their numbers and how effective their pitches are. When they cross that line, it's all about reading barrels, reading swings, understanding what pitches you have. And then sometimes you got to go in battle mode, and you have to get away from all of that. That's the part of pitching that takes younger guys, a little longer to, maybe get a handle on this day and age, because I think less pitchers are a little less apt to become pitching men, thinking man's pitchers these days, more than geared towards stuff and the numbers. So I'm going to tell you, I balance it out, and I keep it that way with our guys. Again, I had to learn all that stuff, but I knew what a sinker looked like. I knew what a good breaking ball looks like. I knew if it was a two-plane breaking ball, if it was a cutter, and I knew how effective the pitch was based on the swing and the result.
And I've said it on the air. I'm sure Glenn said it before, and I've only heard it from other pitchers, having worked with a bunch of them over at MLB Network and whatnot. But a good pitcher has to become his own best pitching coach, because, and this is beyond just the mound visit limit, but you can't be out there holding his hand. You can't be out there saying, "Oh, did you see that swing right there? Take note of that." And the catcher can't be doing all that kind of stuff. You've got to have that element of it to go along with the 95-mile-an-hour heat and the vicious slider and all that kind of stuff. You've got to be able to know when to use those weapons and see it with your own eyes.
No doubt. And that is hitting it right on the head. And it's the reason that, look, I got all these years experience, and as a pitching coach, you think you have all the answers or you have the solutions for these guys. And a lot of times you do. But the reality of it is, like, some of them are going to have a quicker understanding of who they are and what those adjustments are. than others. And I'm going to tell you, every great pitcher that achieves great things in this game, they were young pitchers, and they thought and reacted like young pitchers. I can tell you the way that my brother was wired as a rookie in the big leagues. Well, guess what? 5 years down the road, his maturity heightened, his awareness, his understanding of who he is, pitching in jams, understanding what that pressure feels like, knowing what pitches that you need to go to get out of those jams. Those take time. So the day that you can just turn them loose and have them pitch their way out of those troubles and feel and experience all those feelings and those pivotal times in the game, and they can overcome those, it's like it's the most rewarding and satisfactory thing from a coaching standpoint when you sit back and you watch that. It's like poetry, man. It's so much goes into their trade and the art of becoming a pitcher. And like I said before, it's so delicate, and they all get things at a different rate. But Paul, back to your point, I'm trying to get them to become their own pitching coach, because as much as I sit over on the bullpen, and Donnie is so good at understanding players and what they go through, and I think that's important having that manager that understands that. And Derek Jeter too. Is we understand what they go through, and we've been in their shoes, and we know what their thought process is like when they're out there through those struggles. And it hurts, and it's painful watching that sometimes. I can't make enough mound visits. Sometimes I try to find the magical words to give to those guys to get them through that. And I have some good mound visits, and I have some not so good ones. But it's all a learning process, and they have to go through it, to get to a point where Max Scherzer is today. That guy's got great stuff, right? He's a thinking man's pitcher too.
Yeah.
That took time.
Yeah.
This is year 2 for you here. You talk about growth and development. How much growth did you see from day 1 of spring training when you arrived last year to day 1 of spring training this year, individually and collectively with this staff and the depth of the staff?
Well, anytime you get in, and I made the bold statement about this was really one of the, in terms of staff-wise, some of the best stuff and weapons that I've seen, and it's a bold and dangerous statement, because we know you have to fill in the blanks, and that part is trying to get them to a point to where they believe in themselves and they can pitch and have success. So we're still getting there, and I started to see it's not like I was going to come over and save this organization and be the savior, and you're going to see drastic changes. Some of the changes maybe that I saw, just because I'm privileged to get into their bullpens and then climb inside their heads, is emotionally, mentally, and then physically. I saw a lot of the changes that they went through and the improvements that they made that maybe didn't show up statistically wise, and maybe you guys didn't see that. You're going to, because there's been a process and a blueprint laid out for every guy, and as long as they stay down that path, they're going to get better. We're going to make that happen. What was really nice, and I took an approach. I couldn't come in and bombard and knock the walls down and make my presence be known. There comes a point in time as a pitching coach, initially, that you have to take a little bit of step back, but you have to make sure the direction is good, and that the players can feel that direction, and they can feel those important, detailed points that you're going to ask of them to do. So we made some adjustments there, and you guys started to see some of the fruits of the labor, that those guys that they put in, that work that they put in at the tail end of last year, and what was an ugly season, 100-something losses. Well, I can tell you that a lot of them took that work and they took that trust in myself in that direction. And they went home and they thought a lot about what went on. And we talked about that over the winter. And when they came back, things clicked and made a little more sense to them. You know, they might have been a little more apt to try some things, or maybe they thought about it. And for whatever reason, they decided that they were going to make some adjustments. I'm going to use Jose Urena as a prime example. And, you know, we haven't seen the best version of Jose yet. And I think we've all kind of waited for that great stuff, and we know what he brings between the lines. To be able to channel some of that and expose some different parts of the plate and maybe think his way through some things rather than go knock the building down. You guys might not have noticed it, but he really did some different things this spring. And we had some long conversations, and he decided, and we used analytics. He's not a big analytical guy. He's a feel guy. And so we used some of those things to get through to him, and he started doing some things in the spring that he's never done. And from an analytical standpoint, his breaking ball started turning, started getting two planes to it. He started throwing some four-seam fastballs to glove side and exposing more parts of the plate. Still got that good sinker. He loves the pitch in. His changeup started getting some more separation off his fastball, so everything isn't just so hard. And so he started getting some more usable pitches. Okay, this is a guy that's 28 years old, spent 1 year with myself. You know, maybe the trust wasn't there. I don't know. But the fact is that he went away and took some things away from last season and came back with a little different mindset, and he's on his way. And I can talk about Lopez and lots of the other guys too. So it was important that I learned about these guys and that I had to go through what we went through, and it was painful to get to where we are today. And I really feel with what some of the things that the guys that are doing and some of the changes that they made, that you're going to see some big improvements from your standpoint.
When we signed off in Philadelphia after Game 162 last year, Todd Hollinsworth and I were on the post-game show up in the booth, and I remember saying it that whoever Craig Minervini was in studio, and he asked me thoughts on the year, and I said kind of what you're talking about right now. The path to heaven runs through hell sometimes, and the 105 lost seasons are not fun for the players, for the coaches. Heck, they're not much fun for the broadcasters either, right? But they happen, and you have to take some positives out of it. And I would hope, and certainly I'd open it up to you, I would hope that some of those things, because a lot of the guys that you mentioned, maybe they want more of that taste, but you could see that each one of those guys tasted a little bit of what could be. Caleb, that night in Chicago last year when he sat down, I think it was the first 17 guys. Sandy, his last 6 weeks. Pablo Lopez had one horrible start against the Mets, and the next time out, he looked like a completely different guy. All those things, you hope, were those learning moments that will then springboard these guys into 2020, 21, 22, and going forward.
Yeah, the one thing, the proudest. And man, that moment of leaving, and I use the word leaving, Pablo, Lopez out there in that game against the Mets was hard, because here's a kid, and he's a kid. He's 23 years old. I was a kid at 23, and as smart and as educated as he is and as much feel, it was painful to watch. I feel like he was my son, watching him go through and get his ass kicked. Hard to watch. Bonnie and I talked about it. Maybe we left him out there a little too long. Here's the thing I'm going to tell you. He learned so much about that outing and that butt kicking, and you hate to do it at the major league level, that it allowed him to overcome, some things that we needed to get to that point. He needed to feel that. he needed to learn how to get himself back up on the horse and then make some adjustments, and what those things were going to entail, so that he can move on. I watched Scherzer get his butt kicked. I watched Randy Johnson get his butt kicked. I watched my dad get his butt kicked. I watched my brother get his butt kicked. So guys are going to have some bad days, and young players are unfortunately, they're going to go through that. But there was a lot of good things like you're talking about. And look, you guys are up in the booth, and you're watching it every day. And there's times that you're asking the same, you're seeing and you're going to ask the same questions that I do sometimes with players, and you just never know when they're going to get a handle on that one thing. But I am convinced that in some regard, in some respect, that they all got better in some facet of their trade, and something that they're going to take with them moving forward. And my expectations of them is high, and through that season, the coaching staff and the ownership never really wavered or got away from keeping the attitude in the mental side of wanting to win baseball games. And while we had to have an understanding of a coaching staff where our players were and that it was a part of it, we had to keep things light at times and keep them positive and keep them moving forward. And you know what? None of them went away in the winter. They went away hungry. They went away, disappointed, but not with their heads between their tails where they couldn't come back and get a fresh start to spring training. I know it's going to be a short season, and like you guys said, it's important to get out of the gate. It's the reason I made the decision to stay down here. And so we're committed, and I'm convinced these guys are going to get out of the gate, and you're going to see some great things from these young pitchers.
Mel, I think people listening to you at length, maybe for the first time here today, have to be struck by the passion, by the emotion in your voice. We had Nick Neidert on a few weeks ago. He said on the first day of spring training last year, Mel's first year here, he knew more about me than I knew about myself. This guy's a pitching wizard. But it's obvious this isn't just a job for you. There's such an emotional investment in the success of these pitchers and in the success of this franchise.
Well, you owe it to your players. And I'm going to tell you, I'm a company guy. I've been very loyal to the places that I've worked for, and I believe in our leadership. I believe in our players. And with that being said, I don't go, as much as I love to get away from the game in the winter, I promise you there's not a day, and my wife tells me all the time, quit talking to me like I'm one of your players. I never stop coaching, whether I'm out on my boat. That comes from my dad. And like I told you guys before, those campfires were talking about players. And I wanted to hear the experiences of what it was like working with David Wells, Messina, Cone, Kevin Brown, some of the greats, what they thought about, during tough times or their struggles or what they did to overcome things. And, I really took a lot of time. And, I don't need to tell people this, and I think my players, they feel this with me, is I took a lot of time to get to know them. I wanted to know, from an unbiased standpoint, when I first came over in this organization, to formulate my own opinions, what I thought of them. And I wanted to dig in analytically what our analytical team and Dan Greenlee and our team, what they thought of them. And then I wanted to get to know the player. So, yeah, I took a lot of time and watched thousands and thousands of hours of our guys pitching in games, and I took notes over and over and over again. And I would go back and watch, maybe one particular game that they were on top of their game, and they had a handle on things and things clicked for them. I wanted to look and see what that was, so that when they have some bad times, that maybe I can find something that can put them back in that place. So it's part of coaching. I love people. I love kids. And I still learn something about myself and about players every day. But another thing from my dad, and he used to tell me this, is like, You know, those kids and your pitchers are your family. They're your sons. And some of them are going to cry on your shoulder. I've had, 30-year-old men grab my shoulder, lean on it, and cry on it. It's like, you have to be there for them. So there's a lot instilled in coaching. And when they get their butt kicked, I feel hurt. And when they have success, man, I celebrate at the end of the day for them. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's a skill or if it's just something that I was around the game enough and had a great leader. I think that it comes down to that.
It's a phenomenal answer. It really is. I notice we're coming up on an hour. I know we want to let you go here. There's 1,000 more things that we could talk about, but I notice on your hat there Stotts Fishing Adventures. Tell us a little bit about that when you actually do step away from baseball a little bit.
Well, 15 years ago. So I live in Lewiston, Idaho, fished and hunted my entire life. And I shared you some of the campfire experiences and discussions and stuff. So it was a part of my life. In the off season, I moved to a little town called Lewiston, Idaho. That really was a place that my dad took my brothers and I to hunt and fish, and a place that I fell in love with. So when I moved there, I fished every day on the river, every day. And it's the reason in the beginning here I told you my wife's getting sick of me, because she's used to me being gone hunting and fishing in the off season. And she surely is used to me being gone during the baseball season. And when I'm home, she doesn't see a lot of me because I'm watching videos and even during the baseball season. So we started a guiding business and kind of built our brand, talked about, and it was going to be a fun thing. Hired one guide, started the business myself where I was on the river 5 to 6 days a week, built a website, built a team, created a fishing brand. Now we have 6 full-time guides that fish Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. They fish year-round. Some guys are ex-athletes. They're all family men. And it's kind of cool just to be a part of that. At the end of the day, sometimes it gets me away from the rigorous schedule of being a coach, or maybe having a bad day, and can get me in a good place, back on the river. So another one of my passions. I've had a lot of players and front office people come out and fish with me, and really enjoy sharing our family and the history and some baseball with people. But I do get people on my boat that don't even know who I am, and until they come back and maybe they do some research, they get on our website and look into our personal history, and then the baseball conversations come. And I get asked a lot of crazy questions and put in a lot of bad spots.
Did you in the last hour get put in any bad spots? Just so I hope not.
Not yet.
You guys were gentle, and I have my way of dancing around those.
What's the website? How can people learn more if they want to check it out?
Yeah, so it's www.fishstotts.com, FISHSTOTTS, Stotts, as in Stottlemyre.com. So, yeah, have a wonderful.
Jessica Blaylock out there with you in the near future. Next off season.
I'm trying, you guys aren't letting her come out.
I gotta get her. Well, when the time is right, got to do something on TV about this.
Bring the cameras out. We'll put a poll in, and I'll embarrass you or myself.
Well, it's fishing and coaching. They intersect with that famous passage of, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime.
I have literally had to pull the entire boat out, get the guys out on the shore, take them through the casting thing, scold them, spank them, and then to get them back in a good spot to where they can be productive, just like the pitchers. There's been days, and I've told them, guys, that they're kind of friends, they watch what I go through. It's like, man, I'm just not sure what's more difficult, like the fish today or my young pitchers. And there's some days I have a much easier time getting the fish to respond. So. Yeah, the coaching never stops, but I love to just share the game, really.
Good. We want to let you go, but one thing that we do, it's fun toward the end of our conversations. We call it hit and run. So there's some quick hitting questions, and then of course we let you run. So Geff has those today.
All right, Stott, electronic strike zone, yes or no?
No.
No. Want to elaborate at all, or a quick no?
We've taken enough of the personal and playing side of the game out. So. Love the analytics, love the replays. No. The answer is no. I want the wider zone, and when a guy's had a rough night and he's expanding that zone for my pitchers, I want it.
Mm-hmm. What about the implementation of a pitch clock?
I like it. I think the pace of the game is important. Not for speeding the game up, but I think for the tempo and all that stuff for our pitchers. I think sometimes that's a good thing.
What's the best pitcher's park in Major League Baseball right now?
Well, it was the Marlins.
Fetch is coming in a little bit more this year.
San Diego has always been a great park to pitch in. And when we were out there last year or the year before, it seems like there was more baseballs flying out. But I don't know if that had anything to do with the park, hence.
What's the worst pitcher's park in MLB?
There's a handful of them.
Few in this division.
Arizona's was always a tough one. I tell you what, the ballpark that absolutely scares the pitchers the most, Rockies. Mm-hmm. When they get in that stadium and that sinker's not sinking and the breaking ball's also, has lost bite and finish to it, there is a sense of like, oh, you know what? And they get very tentative, very careful. Not
Your
a good
dad would have loved Coors Field with his sinker.
Well, maybe. Back then, they maybe had some enhancing objects or items, right, Paul?
Okay.
I don't know what you're talking about. Okay.
Our pitchers are at that point where they can use that.
Last one for you. The Marlins are getting set to play Game 7 of the World Series. Who do you want behind the plate calling balls and strikes? What current Major League umpires back there for you? This could go either way. It could be a guy with a huge strike zone. It might be the guy who you think is the best ball strike caller.
Oh, do I say Joe West? Game 7 is about excitement, right? And I'm still a Joe West fan. I think he's a wonderful ball strike umpire. And there's some that I would choose to not have back there. I love Jimmy Joyce too.
Here's a bonus follow-up to that. I worked with Bill Ripken at MLB Network, and one of the things that he said about the way that umpires are constructed in the crews, I don't think he's for an electronic strike zone, but what he does like would be figure out who your best ball strike umpires are and just have them at home plate and second base, and then those guys rotate and figure out. He's got more combinations and permutations, but make it so that we have a crew chief, but also have a home plate umpire as well. That's every other day or once every 3 days or what have you is behind the plate.
I like that. What happens when pitching coaches are put into that category, good and bad? So I get shut. No, you know what? To your point, you think about the game and the ways that we can see the game, through video and how things are scrutinized, and we can do replays and show all the screw ups. I mean, shoot, you can zoom in on Donnie and I's conversation and probably read our lips. That's something that 15 years ago, maybe on our platform wasn't as prominent. So every mistake that they make is going to get scrutinized. And look, they make tons of them. And the strike zones change too.
Right.
There's more and more guys pitching at the top of the zone. And the more that I dug in to it, it's like you can get swings up there. It just seems like it's hard to get called strikes. So the value of being able to go down in the zone where you get more called strikes early to where you can get into counts to where you can get some of those swings at the top. And analytically, if you look at the game, most of your swings and misses are at the top of the zone. But the umpires will call more strikes and be more forgiving at the bottom of the zone at this time. So, it's change. It's an evolution. It's an ongoing thing. But we're able, at the end of the game, we give our catchers their framing metrics and to be able to show how many pitches they stole or that were outside the zone that they brought in for strikes. And you find out, and there's charts that show, umpires' tendencies and whether we pitch to those. If guys are capable of doing that, great. And there's guys that are really, really good back behind the plate. They're consistent day in and day out. And there's some guys that, their zones afloat a little more. They're, like Paul's referring to, they're better base umpires. So maybe that's the way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anybody ever be happy with all of it?
No, of course not. Nobody.
I love their screw ups, and I love when Donnie chews their ass. I don't want that to go away.
Well, the good news is I had a list of about 12 guys that kind of to run off, but we're not going to do that, which only means that we're going to have to bug you another time to kind of go through those. Or hopefully we get a chance to bug you in Jupiter or Miami at some point this season about that sort of stuff. But this was fun. It was really informative. Again, for anybody that hadn't spoken to you like this can hopefully hear what Glenn mentioned before, your passion and emotion for this game and this sport. It's great to see. So, Mel, thank you very much.
No, I appreciate it. My passion is not only for the players but for this organization. I'm telling you what, I'm committed, and I believe in our leaders. And I hope at some point Miami can feel and witness that, all the work that's gone into it, because it's headed in the right direction, fellas.
Yeah,
it's coming.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mel. This is tremendous.
Okay,
Mel.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one.
Marlins pitching coach Mel Stottlemyre. Glenn, that was awesome to hear. Again, as we kind of focused on at the beginning of our show here, the concept of the show was that we might see Mel at 2-3 in the afternoon or after a game on the bus or whatnot, but it's always about that night, and it's rare that we get to expand the conversation. And I'm glad everybody got a chance to listen to that today. It was fantastic.
And as we often say when we wrap up these conversations, we could have gone a lot longer. We could have gone another hour. Like you said, there were a lot of individual pitchers we'd like to ask him about. Could have talked forever about his dad and the impact his dad had, not just on him and on his brother, but on the sport of baseball. Again, if you don't know all about Mel Stottlemyre Sr. as a player, he was on a Hall of Fame track before he tore his rotator cuff at age 32. Science wasn't then what it is now. So he only pitched 11 years in the big leagues. Great pitcher, 5-time All-Star. His numbers in that period were as good as just about anybody in the games. And then his career ended at 32. Great pitching coach, 23 years, great Mets teams, great Yankees teams. And now his legacy lives on in his son, who we're very fortunate to have here in Miami.
Right, and again, he's got the cupboard full with when it comes to pitchers in the organization. He's got a lot to work with, and perhaps in the coming week or two, he'll have one more. That gets us back to our question of the day, Geff, which you brought up, and it's in regards to the draft.
Yeah, you can still go on to my Twitter and vote. We ask who you hope the Marlins will take with the third overall pick in the draft. The first round's coming up on Wednesday night. And at the moment, 41% of you have Asa Lacy, the big lefty out of Texas A&M, who most of the mock drafts have going to the Marlins because they've got the two position players, Torkelson and Martin, going 1 and 2 to the Tigers and the Orioles. Can't go wrong with a lefty who throws 98 miles per hour. Asa Lacy competing at the highest level in the SEC. 40% have Torkelson, big-time bat, major league ready bat, talking a lot of people coming out of Arizona State at first base. Austin Martin, very versatile defender, third base, second base, shortstop, outfield at Vanderbilt. 14% of you have Martin. There 5% have voted for some others. Some of the names popping up: Emerson Hancock, right-hander out of Georgia. Zach Veens, a high school outfielder from Port Orange, Florida. Patrick Bailey, a catcher from NC State. But Asa Lacy and Spencer Torkelson seem to be the people's choice, as they say.
Nice. Well, however the draft goes for the Marlins, we're working on hopefully getting, I don't know if it's going to be our next guest or maybe the one following that, but we're working on trying to get someone who will help us kind of assess the draft. And again, you can really only assess a Major League Baseball draft years down the road, but we'll do our best to kind of do that in the coming weeks or so. Again, a reminder for the podcast, Glenn, and different ways to, you watch us all the time, it's fantastic, but also to listen to the show as well.
Sometimes it's more convenient to listen on a dog walk, on a jog, on the treadmill, in the car. So all of our conversations going all the way back to the beginning, Don Mattingly, Brandon Kinch, go on down the line with the prospects, J.J. Bleday and Nick Neidert, with the Hall of Famers, Jason Stark and Dave Van Horn, Tom Young. All of our conversations now available via podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, at Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Anchor, wherever you get them. Subscribe to the Sev Geff podcast. And we'll have some unique programming on the podcast only. Some stuff you won't see here on our show. We'll have some special podcast programming coming up as well. So subscribe.
Right, absolutely. And again, home run rewards card holders, a reminder for you as well. Today's bonus code, if you missed it earlier, trivia, TRIVIA. Enter the bonus code, score some extra rewards points. Don't forget, new trivia questions being released in the Home Run Rewards portal every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Visit marlins.com/rewards to get rewarded. We've unfortunately, we just say 12 weeks since the last spring training game.
12 weeks today.
So we've been saying for the last 10 or so weeks, hopefully the next time we talk to you, we have some good news regarding a 2020 baseball season. So anyway, stay safe, everybody out there. Stay positive, and we'll hope for the best. Again, our thanks to Mel Stottlemyre Jr. and the Marlins. Geff, fun to talk with you as always. We'll see you soon.
We'll do it again next week.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.